Footsteps, a creaky gate swinging in the distance, or an owl hooting at the moon. The sort of sounds that send shivers down your spine, especially in the deserted streets of Montmartre. Alternatively, those sounds could mean you're in a horror film. The genre has some very specific codes, and you can find almost all of them in the 1978 classic Halloween. Eve Jackson sat down with the film's Hollywood star, who went on to become the poster girl of scary movies.
I have something you might like to see.
We are rolling. Marker.
What scares you, Jamie Lee Curtis?
People who lie and crazy people scare me. You know, a bad person, they show their colors. Crazy people are shape-shifting. And unfortunately, in the world and in our country, we have people who are a little crazy.
A lot crazy, in fact psychotic, is masked murderer Michael Myers.
He's waited for me. I've waited for him. Get out! Go home! Get inside!
The new film brings back his sole survivor, Jamie Lee Curtis's character, Laurie Strode.
Michael Myers escaped. He'll return to Haddonfield, his home.
I need to protect my family.
What was it like returning to this role, this iconic film, 40 years after your first ever film, Halloween?
Close your eyes and open them. That's 40 years. That's how fast it happened. Time is such a weird thing. I feel the same as I did when I was 19 years old. I know a little bit more than I did when I was 19 years old. I've had way more experiences than I did when I was 19 years old. But I can't believe it. It just doesn't seem possible to me that it's been 40 years since that movie.
Do you know that I pray every night that he would escape? So I can kill him.
And a woman fighting back, taking control of her own narrative. Did you have any idea how timely this was when you were making the film?
No. The original movie, Halloween, is about an intellectual girl in a small town in America who has this violence perpetrated on her by this stranger. And she fights back. By the way, everybody fights back in violence perpetrated against them. She survives. There are people that don't. And for that, she's been heralded as sort of this girl who fought back. But she was a wounded warrior, the way, if you study history, soldiers who come back from war are wounded warriors. They're warriors, but they have had crippling wounds, sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally, sometimes psychologically. And Laurie Strode is one of those wounded warriors. She's a young woman who had this violence perpetrated against her and then had no help. And this movie, the new movie, explores what happens to someone when they get no help and how trauma breeds and grows like rust, how it takes over your life. Karen! Where's Ray? Michael's here. Get downstairs. Go, baby, go! Yes, in today's world, the idea of women trying to take back what happened to them and rewrite the narrative and say, that's what happened to me, that is the past, but this is going to be my future. And my future is that I am not a victim of you. I control this because I can take it back from you. And it's a great example that we're seeing throughout the world, and yet this movie was written before the Me Too movement. So it's an interesting thing. Clearly in the universe, this idea has been floating. And, you know, the movie Wonder Woman was written and produced way before Me Too movement. This movie was written before Me Too movement. The Me Too movement was a year ago. 1 calendar year ago. Look at what's happened. So it's a very exciting subject to explore in a movie that, as you said, has a 40-year history.
We hear so much about bad people, bad men in Hollywood. Tell us about a nice guy in Hollywood who's great to work with.
You know, we're hearing about bad men in Hollywood. We're hearing about bad men in politics. We're hearing about bad men everywhere. And by the way, there are bad women everywhere. There are bad people everywhere. There are wonderful people everywhere. My husband is a great man. People who work with him love him and revere him. He is a man of integrity and intelligence and respect. And so that's my example of good men in Hollywood is my husband.
It's a good example. You're turning 60 in November.
I am.
What do you think about the fact that your legacy is going to be that of the Scream Queen?
The idea that I would have a legacy in film is a miracle and one that I never expected. So just saying that is weird. To me, to be the head of anything, to be the top of something, top of the heap, which is very competitive, but you brought it up, is not something I think about. It's not something most people think about. And yet it is a great byproduct of a lot of hard work and being around for a long, long time.
Can you close the closet door?
In horror films, you always have the feeling you're being followed. But you can also trick yourself into thinking you're in danger with an escape game. These real-life puzzles ask participants to solve a mystery together just to get out of the room, and this one has a spooky twist.
Locked in a cold cell by a serial killer, and solving his perverse puzzle is the only way out. This is the theme of the Survival Instinct escape room. And for this participant, Guillaume, it's eerily realistic.
Being tied up and blindfolded is not great.
The rules of the game are simple, but the solution, less so.
In Survival Instinct, the players are immersed in a story similar to that of one of the most famous American horror movies. It's a puzzle. They're locked in creepy prison cells with a strange smell, and they have just 60 minutes to find the way out.
Teamwork is the name of the game. To escape, the participants must work together.
Are all of the numbers there?
1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 8.
C'est fini.
Tu n'as pas trouvé l'antidote à temps. Tu es condamné. Trop tard.
After 60 minutes, their fate is decided. The serial killer will deliver his punishment. But the participants are still satisfied with the experience.
The search for clues reminded me of a real-world version of the Clue board game.
It's pretty hard. You have to work as a team to pass each level.
It's a cool activity to do with friends. A great way to just have fun for an hour.
After a humble start, escape games are increasingly popular in France. There are now more than 1,500 of them spread out across the country.
Halloween is, so they say, the time of year when the dead return to haunt the living. But phantoms are hard to pin down and notoriously difficult to see. If you want a closer look at the dearly departed, head to the Grevin Museum, Paris's treasure trove of waxworks. We'll leave you with a glimpse of some of those souls who are not resting in peace. That's all for this show. We'll see you back in the studio for more arts and culture here on France 24.
Hello, I'm Grayson Perry, and I'm going to be talking about my new exhibition at La Monnaie in Paris on France 24.
Encore, presented by Eve Jackson on France 24 and France24.com.